Alright, and welcome back to another video in my Lunar Mansion or Nakshatra series. In case you missed the last few videos as to what is a Lunar Mansion or a Nakshatra, or in astronomy it's called a lunar station. Basically, one of these astrological placements is the distance that the moon moves in 1 day's time. So since it's measured in degrees and the moon has a 27-day orbit, each one of these placements is 13 and 1/3 degree span of astrological space, and each one of these has one of 9 co-rulers. There are 9 co-rulers. 9 times 3 is 27, and from there you get the entire lunar orbit repeating at the rate of 1 lunar mansion per day. So like I said, these are 13 and 1/3 degrees each, and because astrology uses minutes to calculate the moon, it's 13.2, so you don't have to deal with irrational numbers doing thirds and decimals. So, that being said, today we're talking about the nakshatra of Ashlesha, which is in the end of Cancer. It's from 16.4 degrees Cancer to 30 degrees Cancer or 0 degrees Leo. So this is the 9th lunar mansion, and because of this, it is the last one in the first third, last co-ruler of the first third of the cycle. And the last co-ruler of a cycle of lunar mansions of 9 days is Mercury. So the one we did before was also in Cancer exclusively, and it was the nakshatra of Pusha, which is co-ruled by Saturn, and it represents the dynamic between giving too much and giving too little, and trying to not set boundaries, because Saturn is boundaries and Cancer is basically love and nourishment and care. So those people tend to deal with the idea of setting boundaries when it comes to caring for others and having difficulties with that. Ashlesha Nakshatra is co-ruled by Mercury, and so you have Mercury and Moon working in one part of this sign. And Mercury is sort of logical thinking, speech, creativity, analysis, design, and just like in general creative thinking, the birthplace of creative ideas. It rules the mind, the hands, the stomach, and the liver, I believe, which is related to like detoxing and absorbing new information as well. So Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, which are the signs. Gemini is about communication, and it rules the hands, which is it's creativity, speech, just sales, these kinds of things. Any sort of like magic, like basically where you're making something from nothing, like you would be if you bought something and then sold it for a higher price. That kind of thing is ruled by Mercury. Virgo is about analysis, breaking down information. So it rules the stomach and the liver, which basically just break down the information you eat as food, which is the metaphor there. So, this being said, what happens when you put Mercury and Moon together? Basically what happens is, because the Moon represents care of others, but it also is a water planet, meaning it tends to, or a water sign as well. Cancer is a water sign. So these people tend to be very interested in knowing what's outside of conventional boundaries. So Cancer is probably the least mystical of the water signs, but you have to look at it like this, because if you have a Scorpio sign, the 9th from it is going to be Cancer, so that's going to be least mystical and most practical of the water signs. If you have a Pisces sign, 5th from that is going to be Cancer, which is the least practical. And so because 5th and 9th represent the higher selves of Aries, basically. So Aries is the first sign, Leo is the 5th sign, which is your higher self aesthetic and art and artistic expression and music and all these things. And Sagittarius is the other fire sign, the 9th sign, which represents your intellectual higher self, being a professor, being an intellectual, being perceived as intelligent by others, and also just being scientific in general. These two signs sort of form the higher self of Aries, which is number one, which is the self. Look out for number one. All these sayings come from that. So, this being said, the higher selves of Cancer are the very, very most mystical signs of Scorpio and Pisces. So, even though Cancer might start out in the practical realm, the desire for security and stability, which is one of the hardest things to do in this world because the world is so chaotic, will ultimately lead these people into the occult, even though they start off from a very grounded perspective, very materialistic perspective. But through Cancer's quest for stability, they have to face the sort of enemies, or the sort of enemies of stability, which are chaos. And there are no signs that are more chaotic than Scorpio and Pisces, because it's fixed, immutable water. So this being said, when you put Mercury with Cancer, this person, basically it turns into a sort of an occult salesperson. Like, this person wants to do all the communication and information gathering and the very logical side of Mercury, but they also seek stability through this intelligence, and because of that, they end up eventually digging very, very deep into the unknown and into the mystical side of things and into the occult side of things. And this is kind of the place where you can see, on the very pragmatic end, you can see people who are like just really, really intense business people. Like, sort of like Christian Grey from 50 Shades of Grey is a pretty good example of this. Just even though I know that's like a girl movie or whatever, but the character that he plays is actually a pretty good representation of this. People who are just super, super driven to achieve some form of material success through communication and people skills, but also they're very emotionally connected. Like, they have very strong intuition that they kind of use to swim forward, or sort of like get inside people's heads and sort of manipulate the situation through emotional means. So these people have a reputation of being very cold. And the symbol for this nakshatra, the symbol of the last nakshatra, Pusha, was the cow's udder, which, because basically it gives and gives and gives until it can't give anymore. But the symbol for Ashlesha is the snake, or a woman with a head of snakes, like Medusa. So you get sort of a very dark feminine element here, which is like the element of like possession and coveting things and using manipulation and speech to kind of get what you want. Now, these people are typically very artistic. They have a very, very attractive aesthetic. They have a very appealing sort of, like, you see a lot of emo people, like gothic fashion with this type of thing. So these people are just generally very, very attractive, and they have this charm. But in the same way that a snake can kind of hypnotize you with its eyes, these people have that same quality in general, where they're very seductive and they're very attractive and charming, but generally they are using this, I don't want to say using is the wrong word, but they are connecting with people to gain sort of some form of information or inspiration from them, so that then they can use that to achieve their goals. So these people are kind of always on a mission. Moon and Mercury are the two fastest planets in the zodiac, so the fastest moving planets. Mercury has an orbit of 88 days and then 22 days retrograde. The moon has an orbit of 27 days direct. It never goes retrograde. So these people are kind of always changing, always emotional, always kind of on their grind. They have a very high perception of the world around them. So with that perception comes challenges. People will kind of feel like they're being used by this person often, but that's not really their intention. Their intention is just to pursue their goals. And then when somebody is genuinely inspiring from the standpoint of their goals, they're very, very interested in them until they're no longer interesting, and then they tend to leave. That's not to say everybody who has a planet or two in Ashlesha is going to be like this, but that is just the energy of the lunar mansion itself and the end part of the sign of Cancer itself. For instance, if somebody has Sun in Ashlesha, but they have Venus in Taurus, or they have Venus in like Leo, they're going to behave very differently. And the same is true with all the other planets, and you got to look at the ascendant too. So you can't just judge somebody, like if somebody has their sun here, you can't just look at it and be like, oh, well, they're going to be very cold and emotionally manipulative and driven. that's not fair. You have to look at the entire chart to see. But in general, if somebody only had one sign and it was in Ashlesha, then they would be pretty much the exact figure that I described there. So that being said, that is my analysis of the Ashlesha Nakshatra ruled by Mercury and Moon. And I will see you next time with an analysis of the first lunar mansion of the sign of Leo. So tune in for that.